Good morning. We're going to tough the weather. I was talking in the sacristy this morning, and I don't know, maybe it's just me that finds it interesting, but I was wondering a couple of years ago, like, where on earth it would be this cold, and I started thinking, well, Alaska, then I got online, and I'm like, no, it's 23 there. So I'm like, well, maybe somewhere over in Europe, and I landed on Moscow. So Moscow right now is 11 to 20 below, and if we're just north of that, basically, we're more up in the Siberia weather. So don't underestimate the strength that you have inside of you. You could survive Siberia. Today our scriptures are all centered around the call from God, which is really good for us to hear. As a side note, Samuel's call, like, he's little. They think he was probably like 8 or 9, 10 as this is going on. And so when you think about, your son or your daughter being called to anything really, marriage, religious life, we want to foster that from the time that they're just little. So you're praying for them first and foremost that God would bring them his will, right? That they would be open to that will for their life. And then however it manifests, just like Eli, who was in charge of Samuel, you're supportive of that, right? So we don't want to get in God's way. A lot of the times, surprisingly enough, when I was in seminary, we had guys that, even in our own diocese, that were, their parents weren't exactly happy about the vocation, especially moms, right? Because they start thinking grandchildren and all these things. And so immediately they're like, no, we don't really want that, okay? Well, we don't want to get in God's way, right? We do that. Imagine if a priest who's called doesn't end up in seminary, like the thousands and thousands of souls that may not be saved because of his vocation. So it's a very serious thing. But I want to focus on the gospel here this morning because it's probably one of the most overlooked parts of the gospel, right? When you think of the gospel, maybe the resurrection or the passion or Christ's miracles or whatever it is. But rarely do we think about the thing getting up off the ground, and that's what Jesus is building his team right now. And in these first few pages, it's literally the blueprint on how he interacts with every soul, because this is the way he's calling and relating to the apostles is the exact same way he's going to do this with us. And so it's really the question that I get probably more than anything else as a priest, how do I experience God? Where do I experience God? How do I encounter him in my life, Father? And the Lord remains the same, and a lot of the times that we just pass right over it, right? We're looking for that big wow event, I think we turn on these TV evangelists and, they're being slain in the Spirit, and we think if we're going to experience Christ, that it's got to be in that way. I remember my mother would go to these charismatic services all the time, and she'd come back almost with a frown on her face. I'm like, what's wrong? Well, they were praying over people, and I didn't go down. I'm like, what are you talking about? Well, they were passing out, and I, just felt them pressing on my head really hard. And I'm like, well, that meant you were supposed to go down. You fake it. So, no, I'm kidding. But, at the end of the day, not everybody is going to experience God in that very charismatic way. They might experience him in a multitude of different ways. But he always comes through thoughts, feelings, and desires. So whether it's the charismatic feeling thing that you're going through at the prayer service, or you're in the tractor cruising down the field and all of a sudden this profound thought on how to run your farm better hits you. Or maybe something about the Lord hits you. Or you have a desire to do something which may or may not be religious, right? Right, guys, the desire to do something that your wife would really like, or vice versa, hits you. That's all God. And I could go through all of the different references in the scripture, but I'm telling you, that's where he's at. And that's why I've been trying to mention this at the other masses, but it's good to have a spiritual director, because the spiritual director, you're not meeting with them all the time, but is there to point out in your life or to acknowledge where the Lord is. The Lord is the one leading you, but you're like, I had this thought, and the director's like, that's God, right? I had this feeling when I was in my holy hour, whatever it might be, that's God. And then you start learning how to speak his language, and you suddenly discover that the Lord is all over your life. So how does it start? Well, we're going to take a look at the gospel. What is the first thing that Jesus says to them? Rabbi, you just see a couple of young guys coming up. Jesus is only 30 himself at this point. And it's the most profound question possibly in the gospel. And it's the question that it was relevant then and it is relevant now. What are you looking for? I'm asking all you on behalf of Christ. What are you looking for? The world is offering you a million things as to convince you with focus groups and think tanks, all to get your money, what you're looking for. What is it that you want? More money? Is that going to satisfy? Well, we've got the most money that the United States of America or any other country in human history has ever had. How's that working out for us? It's more stuff. Gosh, do we have a lot of stuff. By the way, I'm preaching to myself here today, right? I've been referencing the Amazon box. Oh, how we love the Amazon package, right? There it is. You get home, and whatever that thing was that you ordered, it's sitting there. Ha-ha. And anything that you want now is available at the click of a finger. And kind of now after COVID, but before COVID for sure, it can be there in 2 days. Anything you want in 2 days. No other time in human history has ever seen stuff from food and drink to anything that you want to buy, any and all things available to you in 2 days. We have everything. But ironically, in here, we seemingly have nothing. And then there's all the other stuff. Better health, more beauty, more success. We got the greatest medicine in the world. We've almost eradicated the cavity. Beauty. We're the most beautiful people that have ever existed. And success, as defined by worldly standards, is everywhere. When we look into our world, people's lives are filled with everything, and yet they have nothing. And so what is it that we're looking for? We don't even know, right? The devil's played such a game with us that he's got us all over the place. But it's easily answered. And you'll say, oh, well, of course, Father, as soon as I say it, but we're looking for love. So the natural word for love, which we're way more focused on now, is family. As a matter of fact, family is the closest word to God in the natural life that we have. And we depend a lot upon that. But here is the monumental secret of our time. There is no human soul or souls that can satisfy your desire for love. That's why we have so much divorce. Because we start getting let down, right? You promised to love me, and yeah, you're a sinner like me. Guess what? You can't. Right? We're in this together. We're going to do the best we can. We're learning from each other. It's all about the school of sacrificial love. But no matter how hard we try, we are never going to totally fulfill that. And then my kids aren't either, right? And then all the stuff with family starts happening. And then it's a big letdown sometimes. And other times it's really great. So we get a taste of it. And we were called into it, but we are only made for one. Made by him and for him and in him. And his name is Jesus. And so you can see in the apostles' interaction with him, sometimes they're talking to God, like as they see him, obviously that's got to be a moment just to see him. And then they're the ones chosen for this role for all eternity, which they don't even know yet. And then he says in such a profound way that it must have just impacted them to the core, what are you looking for? Where do you stay? What a stupid answer, right? And he's like, but that's it then, right? Then it's, come and see. Come and see. And your whole life is going to change. Because you don't even know who you are. I'm the only one, says Jesus, that knows you. You don't even know yourself. And so what are we looking for? We're looking for him. Where do we find him? Well, praise be Jesus Christ that he is here. Now, this is the problem of all problems. It's too easy. I wish I had a way to make church harder. Maybe cold weather. I don't know, the hardcores are here today, right? You know, because there's no, like, you don't have to, like, buy it. That would give a value. Thank God, really. But, you know, it's like it's just too easy. What do you mean God's just in the bread in the tabernacle? Yeah, that's who he is. And yet, when we look into history or even our time, the people that find him. I'm not talking just like come to church. You got to find him. Right? There are a lot of men and women in the world, but you had to find your spouse. And if you didn't find your spouse, you don't have the eternal souls of your children and maybe your grandchildren. That's pretty significant. You may know that the person is out there and all the things that come with that, but until you find that person and then find them in themselves and fall in love with them. The same thing exists with the incarnate God. Because now he's one of us. So this thing doesn't get like wildly, like the Old Testament is like, well, look at all the stuff that happened in the Old Testament. I agree. That's when God was in heaven and we were down here. And so like thunder and lightning bolts. Now God is one of us and he's taken us to himself. So he's part of the family. And he's meek and humble of heart, like he himself says. So here he is day in, day out. Where do you find him? Well, you find his loving embrace in the sacrament of reconciliation, just like any other family, right? When I'm weak, broken, sinful, discouraged, in despair because of what I've done or who I am or the brokenness that fills my soul, I find his warm, loving embrace in the sacrament of reconciliation. If you do not practice that sacrament regularly, you don't know him. You certainly don't know that side of him. Nor would you about anybody else until you get to know him. Mass. You know, if Mass is nothing more than a duty, right? Marriage is somewhat like this. And as intimacy can be for married couples. Well, I guess it's part of the contract. 5 o'clock on Thursdays. Well, this is that level of intimacy that's going on right now. In this Mass. I've recently been thinking a lot, this is deep thoughts of a priest here, but anyway, that I'm not married. Everybody's like, well, you're married to the church. No, I'm not married to an institution, right? That's just dumb. Jesus is a man. I'm not married to him. But I think I might be married to the Mass. Because the Mass is this life-giving union between the church and Christ, and I'm the intermediary in which it's happening in. Anyway, that's a whole side note. But the intimacy of this life-giving love feast is where he really is at. But it's kind of like marriage. We could take that for granted, right? This goes on forever. Yeah, marriage, honeymoon, wonderful, and then comes the long haul, right? Maybe you have some children on the way. Those are big moments. But real marriage is the little acts of love in the day-to-day cycle of life. The Mass is no different, and Jesus is present in it, but it can get that way, and I know that. When I was at officer training school, and I think I shared this story, but you know, Delta lost my luggage. It was a real bad deal for me with the drill sergeants, but at the end of the day, they also lost my Mass kit in my luggage. So for the first time in 15 years, I wasn't able to celebrate the Mass. I went to bed that night under a lot of stress, didn't really even notice it. I got to my Mass the next night. You can have adoration during the Mass. And I'm sitting there, and I got about 2 minutes into adoration. I realized that I had missed Mass the day before, first Mass in 15 years. And I had this profound realization of how unbelievably I had taken the Mass and my relationship with Christ and his church and the holiness of it and the love in it for granted. It had just become routine. And I broke down crying. I was so grateful that I was still a priest and still able to celebrate that Mass that second day. I think it could be compared to something like if you found out that your spouse had cancer and all of a sudden it just shocks you. Oh my gosh. Have I told you how much you mean to me? So, this is a side note to this homily, and it's cold outside, and there's very few people here, so I can go on for a little bit. But if you have not told the loved ones in your life that you love them, tell them today. It's that old German-Russian man saying, right? You tell your wife you love her? I told her once at my wedding, and if it changes, I'll let her know. Be kind and share those things. The Holy Hour. Telling you, if you dive into the Holy Hour, it's tough. It was for me. I had a rector of a seminary that was like, it's minor seminary. You guys all going to start doing this Holy Hour. And of course, we were like, all right. No, everybody's like, well, we got studying to do. Yeah, so it's Jesus seminarians. Yeah, well, there's things like my books that are more important. Even the seminarians had a problem with it. That was 22 years ago. I've been doing one ever since. If I miss it, and I'm not trying to say I'm holy or anything. I'm just trying to share the experience with you. But if I miss it, I can feel it. I feel the absence of his presence in my life. The same thing, like if you go on vacation and your husband or wife or kids aren't with you, or on a business trip, by the time you get back, you're big embraces, right? Same thing with the Holy Hour. But if we're not doing one, we'll never know that. And the list goes on, okay? So what's it all about? Well, this is what the apostles were encountering in those early days. And then what happens is you get your life the way Jesus knows it and wants you to know it in and with and through him. So most of our lives are just, granted, he's guiding it, but we're stumbling from one thing to the next just trying to figure it out. We're not discerning anything because we're not in a deep enough relationship with him, because we're not putting that foot forward. I do it, right? I'm going to get it figured out. And a lot of the times that turns into a mess. And most of us, including the apostles, get it wrong on some level, especially when we're young. So Peter is a wealthy businessman in Capernaum who owns his own fishing business. We know this because his house is right next to the synagogue. And he's not called to be a wealthy fisherman. He's called to be the first pope of the Catholic Church, working with Christ to found it. I'm quite sure he had no idea. None of them did. They had to meet him, and in that encounter, he's going to show them who they really are. And so when we come to know Jesus in this intimacy, and again, it's not the big aha moment, it's the love that happens in the day-to-day life. What's happening today, Lord? I don't know. What are you doing with me? I want my life to be your will. And I know this because I'm going through it now with all of you, right? We're all on this same journey. And I went through it years ago. I thought that I was called to be a nurse. It's in my last year in nursing school at UND. I wanted to be married. I was almost married. I wanted to be a father and have a family. And then in a very turbulent, wild experience, I met Jesus for the first time. Been a Catholic my whole life. And then he came to get me, to save me, really. I wasn't called to heal the body. I was called to heal the heart and the soul. I wasn't called to natural marriage, but to give my heart completely and my life to Christ, God, and ministry in the church. I wasn't called to be a natural father. I was called to be a supernatural father with more children both here and in eternity than I can even imagine. I was called to be a priest. I'm probably the last guy on the list that you would have thought was called. But I can't thank God enough for calling me to this vocation. And now I know him. And in knowing him, I love him. Life lived in God is a forever expanding story all the way into eternity and beyond. And so as we come to receive Holy Communion today, hear the little whisper of Jesus. Your life has only just begun.